Okay, go ahead, Tor.
Yeah. So the gist is, I hear you about balancing the investments and demand on the power grid of AI with, various other things, but there is a competition between companies to innovate first to gain the high ground so they have a stable economic future. And that makes it very unstable because you're going to see AI plants put in a place where it doesn't make sense for the electrical grid and it raises everybody's electrical price maybe double or triple, which it would never be sensible under a regular arrangement, but it's a move of desperation by companies trying to stay competitive.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because it puts everything we're talking about in perspective. All right, so I want to start the meeting from the perspective of what happened on Tuesday morning. So all these things are consequences of what happened Tuesday morning. On Tuesday morning, I got an email. It was written to Kay. It was written by Chris Kavikoff, who's a major supporter of ProRate and everything I do. And he sent this, which was obviously a subscriber to Energy Gang, the Energy Gang. And he sent this, and it's not that complicated. And we summarized it. He said, there is a meeting, and there is something going on in New York called Climate Week this week, and it's in New York City, mostly or maybe exclusively in NYU. It should say NYU, but he's at NYC. Anyway, so, and maybe it's other places besides NYU, but this particular meeting was in a particular room in NYU, which was the lab of Amy Myers, who is a member of the faculty at NYU. And we had
I think Tor has a question about that.
I'm just scanning this real quick. There was another announcement. Leon Simmons, James Hansen, they're calling for 3 degrees Celsius by 2050, based on the radiation they're seeing in the North Pacific and a couple others. That's only 25 years away.
Okay, right. Let me talk because
Okay.
I want to cover it. Okay. And I'm sorry I can't say longer, but I'm going to rush through this because there's some real important stuff that this guy, Luca, who wrote to me, Luca from the Electricity Brain Trust. And I'm going to tell you about him. I'm really excited that somebody responded. But let me just tell you how we got started. So Chris Kavikoff subscribes to Energy Gang, got this email and sent it to Kay and I. Why? Because the word rate design is in here. I'm trying to find where it is. It's somewhere in here. And let's see. I find it. All right, let's see. The road shot's real, the data center is constructed, and flat demand, electricity must build, power rates. And one question is, it talked about rates. I don't know what it is. Somewhere there. It talks about rates, and Brett saw it. He said, well, if it talks about rates, I need to send this to Marnie.
Yeah,
He sent it to us. I didn't see it until the evening. And then as soon as I saw it, I dove into it. I watched this video. I listened to the audio. It's over an hour long. And although I tried to make good sense out of it, it was hard to listen to it in one sitting. And I decided I really needed to make good sense out of it. So I wanted to get it in a transcription. And I sent the email to every member of the board, but Brendan knew how to do it. And Brendan,
it was like 6 a.m. you sent it. Yeah, and I got it done by 7 or
he
whatever.
sent me a copy of it. And although the actual document we're looking at now, with an edited version, everything you see in 12 point is in the original version he sent. Okay. Some things are in italics because I did it to emphasize. But everything in 12 point, including the title, was created by an AI program based on the audio that was generated by the Energy Gang. And he sent it to me, and I received it on Wednesday morning. And by the way, this made even more tough because Yom Kippur was Wednesday evening, so I really didn't have a lot of time to do it. But nevertheless, I started reading it, and I realized it had a whole bunch of things that needed to be clarified. For example, over here, you see, I'm going to read the sentence without my comment, and I'm reading with my comment. The absolute SMO and nuclear be deployed in the future as carbon-free energy. But I also want to say the timing issue of all this, 116 gigawatts of data centers are ready to be connected. We need that energy now. Okay, and I'm gonna read it how I edited it. Okay, okay, we absolutely need SMR and nuclear to be deployed in the future as carbon free. And I said, who said that? And who said SMR is the cheapest and fastest way? Moreover, there's much disagreement regarding how green SMR. And then I converted energy and power. So I added comments because I thought you people didn't understand that what seems to be said without assumptions which are obviously true, they are not obviously true. From the very beginning, the second sentence of this entire document has things that are obviously true. So I decided I needed to comment on it, make sure anyone reading it would be able to fully understand it, at least like I did. So notice in the third sentence, the rate design pops up and means that they consider rate design a critical issue in getting these data centers online. In case you don't understand it, what's the part of what? Data centers are where you do the AI work. You can do it other places. That's primarily where we do it. And we know in Louisiana, they just signed on a really large data center in northeastern Louisiana of 70 football field size. And the company that sold that to Louisiana is Meta. And although it seems weird, you're going to come back around to that close to the end of this meeting because there's something that Luca said. So you don't know who Luca is yet. That's okay. I'll explain it to you. It's all right. Anyway, so I took this text and I edited it. It took me easily 5 hours, maybe more, to add all these comments. And I put them in there because I don't think people can read between the lines like I can, that you need to understand what's going on. For example, he said, utilities design cat rates. They do not design rates. The rates are actually designed by the regulator, and any citizen has the opportunity to contribute to design the rates. Anyway, so then he said this amazing sentence, which I found amazingly wrong. He says that's the biggest question facing the power industry in this country right now. Now, that might be the biggest question facing the introduction of data centers into the power industry, but that's not what he said. He said the biggest question facing power industry in the country now. And I wrote, this is hardly the case. Consider this. 1, the utility regulators appear to do anything new. 2, they have the best regulators that money can buy. 3, we have investment-based instead of performance-based remuneration. 4, our grid operates based on a 100-year-old principle. Every electric energy must flow from the central generators to the grid, not instead of that direction. Equity and fairness have always been undermined by numerous cross subsidies. There's presumed right to connect to the grid and demand as much power and energy as you want. You're addicted to fossil fuels, and the natural environment has little to no standing. You may not know what the word standing means, but if in a legal case, if you don't have standing, you can't send a request or anything. Am I putting you to sleep, Dave?
No,
Okay, all right.
my eyes hurt.
Okay, your eyes are okay. Anyway, I added comments. And so I sent this out to us, and no one in our group commented. Although I spoke to Kay, and she told me she thought it was a little bit too busy. And we should talk a little bit about how we make these presentations, because she thinks it's too much content too often. It should be less content. And the good stuff should stand up for the bad. And this happens to be really good stuff, but she doesn't know how we're going to talk about in this much time. But anyway, so she likes the content, but she thinks we do too many meetings. So anyway, I made lots of comments, and I sent it out. And as you can see, when I don't know where it shows up, there's 14,000 words, 31 pages, a lot of content, and I added a lot of comments. All right, so I'm not going to go over the comments, but I'm going to go over a few of them. So as it turns out, I sent it out. Nobody commented from our group, so I decided I was going to send it to the Electricity Brain Trust. So you guys just saw this email, which went out on Tuesday afternoon. This came to me on Tuesday. I sent this out Wednesday afternoon, inviting you to the meeting. And I know that I hadn't finished editing the transcription. So the first version of this said that the transcription was only 50% edited, the comments. The last version says it's completely edited. And also, in order to give you a summary of what's going on, Brendan created a video. So here's the link to the video Brendan created. You can play it really quick. It's only 6 minutes. Tell me if the audio is, okay?
You know, artificial intelligence feels like it's changing everything, right? But behind all that magic, there's this massive hidden cost. The incredible amount of power that AI needs is pushing our energy grid, a system that's barely changed in decades, right to its absolute breaking point. Okay, let's get into it. And look, this isn't some far off problem we can deal with later. This is happening right now. A battle is brewing between our ambitions for technology and the physical limits of our world, and it's playing out in towns all across the country. I mean, this has gone way beyond just a tech issue. When you have top political figures starting to sound the alarm on grid capacity, you know this conversation has officially hit the mainstream. And the core concern? It's pretty simple, and it affects every single one of us. Is the price for all this AI progress going to be a massive spike in our electricity bills? And it is not just talk. Take what happened in Indianapolis. A $1 billion data center project actually got shut down because residents protested. They were worried about what a huge new facility would do to their local power supply, and yeah, to their wallets. This is a really clear sign that people are starting to push back. So, just how big is this power demand we're talking about? Okay, get ready for this number. 116 gigawatts. That's the power needed just for the data centers that are already planned or being built. Now, to put that into perspective for you, 116 gigawatts is 15% of the entire peak electricity load for the United States. We are talking about a truly monumental jump in power demand. And if you really want to see the shock to the system, just look at this chart. For 20 years, power demand in the US was basically flat. We kind of got out of the habit of building big new power infrastructure. And now, bam, AI is forcing us to add this colossal new demand in just the next 3 years. The scale of this change, it's just completely unprecedented. So all this new demand, it leads to one inevitable question, right? Who is going to pay for all of it? Because that strain on the grid, it translates directly into a strain on all of our bank accounts. And it's already happening. Across the country, prices are up 6% in just the last year. But in some places, like Maine, they've shot up by a whopping 40%. Now, AI isn't the only reason, but this huge new demand is landing on a system where costs were already going up. And get this, in just the first 6 months of this year, utilities got the green light for $29 billion in rate hikes. That's double the amount from the same time last year. So yeah, the costs to upgrade the system are already being passed along to customers. So to deal with this, utilities are basically creating new rules for their biggest customers, the data centers. They're asking for things like minimum power charges and are trying to lock them into really long contracts, like 10 or 12 years, just to make sure the huge cost of building new infrastructure gets covered. But the tech industry isn't just standing by and watching this happen. They see the problem and they're actually making some massive proactive moves to try and solve it. And companies like AWS are tackling this head on with some incredibly ambitious goals. They've already hit their 100% renewable energy match, years ahead of schedule. Now they're shooting for net zero carbon by 2040, pouring billions into green energy, and even pioneering next gen nuclear power. And that brings us to these things called SMRs. The easiest way to think of them is as advanced mini nuclear reactors. The key is that they can provide a steady 24/7 stream of carbon-free power, which is exactly what a power-hungry data center needs. It's a huge part of the long-term solution. But you know, it's not just about finding new sources of power. It's also about using less of it. And the pace of innovation here is just, it's wild. In only 2 years, NVIDIA has made its hardware 30 times more energy efficient for the same AI job. That's a 97% drop in the power needed to get the same result. Incredible. Okay, so up to this point, AI has pretty much been the villain of our story, right? The big power hog. But this is where the plot takes a really interesting twist. What if AI isn't just the problem? What if it's also the solution? Think about it this way. The side effects of AI are just staggering. It's already being used to make factories and building cooling systems way more efficient, cutting their energy use by 30 to 40%. The energy AI helps save across the rest of the economy could soon be way bigger than the energy it uses itself. And this is leading to a fundamental shift in thinking. The old view was that data centers were just a constant, dumb drain on the power grid. But the new reality? Well, they can actually be flexible assets that help keep the grid stable by powering down when the system is under a lot of stress. And hey, this isn't just some theory. Look at this real world example from a metadata center in Virginia. During a heat wave, the price of electricity suddenly spiked from $30 to over $1,700. So what did the data center do? It slashed its power use by 90%. In 1 hour, that move saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. And more importantly, it helps stabilize the power grid for everybody else. The potential here is absolutely enormous. If all data centers could be this flexible for just a few dozen hours every year, we could free up 100 gigawatts of power on our existing grid. That's almost enough to cancel out all that new demand we were talking about at the start. So we have this massive problem, and we've got some pretty incredible potential solutions. But there's a catch, and that catch is all about a critical mismatch in timing. Here's the whole conflict in a nutshell. The demand is immediate. We need that 116 gigawatts of power in the next 2 to 3 years. But the big game-changing solutions, like those small modular reactors, they won't really start coming online until the 2030s. And this is what has industry experts really concerned. As Exershu Zhou from Wood Mackenzie puts it, there's a real risk of a power crisis in that gap. That 5 to 10 year window is what they're really worried about. The challenge now is just to figure out how we bridge that gap. Which leaves us right here with this final question. AI has created one of the greatest infrastructure challenges of our time, but with its incredible power to optimize, to predict, and to innovate, it also might be giving us the very tools we need to solve it. The race is on.
Well, I want to tell you some things that you probably didn't realize. One of them, go back to,
Year window is what they're thinking. And building cool plot takes a efficient for the same in only 2 years. NVIDIA finding new source. It's a huge, a steadiest way to think done nuclear power, being for net zero 100%. And companies like AWS happen. But the tech make sure the huge and are trying to lock them into really are basically creating to upgrade the system. Utilities got the green more costs.
that the
More.
data centers are
Now,
flexible.
are up 6%. Our
Most people
bank
don't think
accounts.
the data center is
Into a
flexible.
strength the grid, it translates directly.
Can't get to that, wasting your time and a lot of noise. The data center that they happen to have picked
Yeah, the one in Virginia.
that showed flexibility.
It's in the final fourth of the video.
What?
It's in the final fourth of the video, and it talks about section 4.
Here it is.
Yeah.
This is the picture. The load dropped over 90% during a 1 hour difference. The thing is, this is not a regular data center. This is a meta data center. Does Meta do AI? No, Meta does Facebook, right?
Meta does AI as well.
Well,
What's their
anyway,
can't remember the name of their
bottom line is,
Meta AI.
do these companies, by the way, Meta is doing the one in Louisiana, which will definitely be AI. But there's a question as to whether the data set is really flexible, which is really a big deal. And so, if you read the document that I was editing, I was going to show it to you. This document, they talk about the flexibility of the data center. They said that if we could flex it, we can use it to lower the cost of the grid for everyone. And you think by the time you finish reading this, that we really can flex. It's the same percentages that's just shown in the video. Okay, 15%. Okay, but notice that they make a mention of a study done in North Carolina, I think at Duke, where if they were able to flex at 1%, they would save 100 gigawatts, which is almost the same amount they say they need, right? So why don't we just make sure we can flex? The problem is, they say they can flex, but you'll see the guy that I invited to talk to us said they don't flex. So let's go look at that. So,
Yeah, I was wondering what was involved with that flex, because if they could just reduce 90% and have operations as normal, then why don't they just always do that? You know, why, what's the extra 90% for, basically?
One part of the video says we need 115 gigawatts. Another one says if we can fix 1% of the time,
We
could
save
save
100 of it, yeah.
gigawatts. So it's a big deal whether we can fix. So I said that, you go back to the email thread. So over here, our happened. So Brendan created this on Wednesday morning, and on my request, so we have something to send out. So with all the pieces, what I say we would have, press as an indication, the transcription that Brendan made from the video, the 6-minute video, and my job was to annotate, comment on the 35-page transcription, which I spent a lot of time, easily 5 to 10 hours. And then I sent it out, and I want to make this summary that I created by around 9 o'clock this morning. So it said, this is too important. It needs more eyes and a smaller list I normally invite. In fact, how can the grid help AI and vice versa is the subject of the meeting tonight. I expect that there are many reasons why some of you will find this controversial, but I think most of you will want to know about this activity literally from the horse's mouths, which are a representative of AWS, which you may not remember what that is. AWS is
Amazon, right?
is Amazon Web Services. And the guy
Services.
who speaks for Amazon Web Services is Josh. Remember that name, Josh, when you're going on. And then there was someone representing NVIDIA. And NVIDIA, Josh is the head of NVIDIA, and Craig is the head of Amazon Web Services. And there's also this guy, Shishu, which I'm mispronouncing, who also works at Wood Mackenzie, where Ed is from. So we have 2 guys from Wood Mackenzie and 2 guys who are leaders of NVIDIA and AWS, as well as Amy Myers. And those are the, let's see, 6 people who are talking. So the horse.
I wanted to also mention that Energy Gang is going to be present at the ACOR event we talked about last week.
Uh-huh.
Brad reached out and said, "Hey, Energy Gang's actually showing up at ACOR." He read your emails just to let you know.
I looked at this video with absolute open eyes, no intention to trash it, but I found myself having to write things between the lines to explain it, and found these absurd comments like, over here, the biggest problem facing the electricity grid is rates. And I said, that's not true. I read this to you just now, okay? And then later on, when Amy explains that with the virtual peaking time by demand response, which is another name for the same thing, Josh said he never heard of that. It's ridiculous, because demand response has been active in California for 2 decades. So what kind of a guy is this guy, Ed, who's supposed to be the moderator of this? And so I started realizing there was something fluffy about this meeting. So I decided I'm going to say everything I think I should say to explain it. For example, here is an example of the AI group, AWS, trying to sell a $10 billion investment to a utility. So let me read this particular sentence. Thinking back to a recent investment, we announced $10 billion investment in a data center in next door, the state of Mississippi. That's the state's largest economic development project ever. We're working with the local utility there, Entergy, as part of our agreement to grow their system today, and we'll be scaling over a number of years. We're also bringing 650 megawatts of new utility scale solar with us to the energy system. And this is what I wrote. By the word with us, we mean as the part of the original package, you get approval from the regulator to build this data center, even though we know that 650 megawatts will not fully power the data center we are building. And thus we know that the very low income Mississippi ratepayer will be forced to partially subsidize our data center, while Entergy will be laughing all the way to the bank. Okay. Now, I know that. I know Entergy. And if the people who will go in and ask Entergy to make a deal don't understand what's going on, then they're fooling themselves or they're really cheaters. Because we know that's what they're going to do. So we know Entergy, we don't need to know AWI to understand what we said. So I also pointed out, we know that it's going to take partnerships like that across the country, is what they said, and certainly across the world in order to achieve both our goals in terms of climate, which we really haven't talked about climate, you'll see why later on, but also serve our customers. What does it mean by serve our customers? Who are their customers? We'll get into that in a minute. Frankly, they're the ones who we want, they're the ones that want to be on the cloud. Like all these poor low-income ratepayers want to be on the cloud, right? And want to innovate AI and want to do more with machine learning, while we largely ignore the which is what I wrote, low-income payers who are not interested in cloud, and by this attitude, will help to further polarize the U.S. electorate. So why did I say polarize? Well, what's going to happen? The people who are going to vote for Trump are the people on the right wing, or the people less conservative, more conservative. They're going to say, why did you guys stick me with this big energy bill, and I can't benefit from it because I don't use the power, right? So you're going to polarize. Somebody's going to be on the right, and someone's going to be in the left and complaining, who did this? In fact, they even say this is going to be a big midterm conversation, and it's going to be the issue of the day, much like in 1970, the issue was the oil prices. And actually talk about that extensively. So, so I commented, and I wanted people to be paying attention to this very carefully. And then there was another comment where this guy said that if you make more electricity, that's good for the economy. And that is just like, we just decided that. We never got that statement. But he's hearing between the lines that people believe that. And the way you look at it is low growth is a very powerful economic driver for the economy. But then I said, but this is an extremely naive way to understand the relationship between economic growth and energy use. Rocky Mountain Institute showed over 2 decades ago that we need not be, these are not linked, and these have not been closely linked for over 3 decades. So we know economic growth has nothing to do with the amount of energy we use, because we're making our economy more and more efficient, and therefore we can make more gross domestic product without using more energy. They completely diverge. And these people naively think that's true, and there's no evidence for it. But because they think it's true, they think we're doing something great for the economy by making us make more electricity. That is literally as naive as that. That's their argument. So, okay, so now I make all these comments and I clarify things. Like, for example, they're talking about gasoline over here. Suppose the gasoline price is too high. Oh, by the way, saying they really think in the midterms it's already going to be a big political issue. Well, you can be damn straight it's a big political issue when your utility bill goes up by 15 to 40%. Okay, and that's a big issue in the current governor's race in New Jersey. And he said, what's going to happen? It's going to be like gasoline was in the 70s. But in the 70s, you could always use your backbone to call Saudi Arabia and get them to lower the price of oil. But it looks like the electricity price is going to be the unique political football that changes election result. And so, anyway, I commented on all this, and I was hoping people would read it. So I sent to the Electricity Brain Trust, and I got this amazing response. So, what happened? So, I sent the invitation to the Electricity Brain Trust at around 8 o'clock this morning. Can't see that. I have to read between the lines, because if it's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Italy, what time is it in Louisiana, right? That's how you know. Anyway, amazing. I got a comment. At my time was noon, And he said, "Dear Myron, I'm Luco Lo Schiava. You know how to pronounce it, Italian. Tell me how to pronounce it. Schiava. Senior Regulatory Specialist at ERA, Energy Regulators Regional Association, which is like the NARUC of Europe, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. And so she works in the regulatory arm of the International Association of Utility Regulators. He's former director of the Italian Regulatory Authority, and he's been working ERA paper on comparative analysis of how EU and US jurisdictions are addressing the AI data center next. Namely, he is an expert, he's a legal expert in this. So he wrote, "Dear Myron, your online comments in Energy Grant effectively challenge podcasts and optimistic framing, and I fully agree. I believe my paper provides systematic regulatory evidence that strengthens your critique. I added some comments in the attached version of the commentary to strengthen the critique. Number one, grounding objections in the technical literature. Meaning, he's not just going to take mine. Sorry.
Yeah. No. That's great.
Okay. Using NERC with the National Energy Reliability Council of the U.S., IAE, which is the U.S. International Energy Agency forecast, highlighting the EU-US regulatory divergence that reveals that things aren't just American issues, connecting the flexibility rhetoric to actually policy failures like Ireland and Spain, and emphasizing the timing mismatch between claim benefits, which she says they happen in 3 years, and actually regulatory timeframes, which are mandatory for NERC reliability standards. So he really addressed this like a scientist, because he's an attorney, and you have to be able to put his money where his mouth is. Otherwise, it's not useful to the agencies he works with. So the core weakness in the podcast scenario is treating data centers as both ultra reliable, critical, and flexible. These are kind of almost contradictory. The ultra reliable critical infrastructure, which means you're going to keep them powered all the time, that's hospitals, and they're flexible access, which means you can flex them, which means you don't need to power them all the time. It's a logical contradiction that your paper should hammer home, but your comment should hammer home. Namely, I said it, but I didn't reach.
Yeah, say it explicitly. That's a great point. I think that goes back to the wait, where did we get the 90% flexibility to drop that, but still somehow be operational? But anyway, yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
My papers, comparative analysis, shows regulators on both sides of the Atlantic are rejecting this narrative, not the naive, stupid Public Service Commission of Louisiana.
Yeah.
Smarter ones, they're developing frameworks that treat these facilities as what they actually are: massive, inflexible roads requiring unprecedented regulatory oversight. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss this further. You're great for any feedback on my analysis, your practical insights from the field. Actually, thinks I am practical working in the field. On invaluable for finding academic framework, as well as practitioners, regulators, and activities. In this case, it can be interest of you. I attached a paper that I gave at the annual conference of EFELA, the European Federation of Energy Law Associations. So
Wonderful.
In Budapest, by the way, there's an H in there.
Yeah, Budapest.
Budapest, right?
Yeah. I
Last
stayed there 14 days.
Right.
I was living in Austria.
And best regards, and again, his phone number, his contact information, etc. All right, so once I received it, I forwarded it to you guys. Actually sent it. And I sent it to you, and then an hour or two later, I couldn't find his comments because he said he made comments. Okay, he added the comments to my transcript. I couldn't find the comments at first, but eventually I did. I called him, I wrote to him, and he told me where the comments were. So now we're going to go over the comments. Okay, so get back to the Word document. This is the same document that I wrote, and you don't see any of his comments because he didn't put his comments in line. He put his comments in the standard place you put comments in a Word document, which is on the side. Don't you remember? If you ever put comments in a Word document? Well, he put them on the side where they belong. And I showed you how to do it. Unfortunately, if I make the text big enough so you can see the ones on the left, okay? You still can't see the ones on the right, but I figured out how to do it. I put an extra app on my taskbar, which lets me do it. It's called Magnify. If I click on it and I move it over here, let's see. What am I magnifying? Magnify this. You can get to look. Let's see.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Right, so I can also move this over here. And so he made all his comments, and we can look at them at the same time. So can you guys see this text?
Yeah. Yeah. It's well zoomed in. I appreciate it.
Okay, so rate design is indeed critical, but tariffs are not a unique matter on the regulatory table. What does that mean? That means that if someone makes a rate or a tariff, it's what you get is not what you think you get. It depends upon what you think you're looking for, and you don't get the same thing. And he talks about how what's going on in Europe is very different than what's going on in the US. That is an overview. Here's the content. And he wrote a paper literally this year. He only joined the Regulatory Association legal staff in January of this year. So he's been doing this for less than a year, and he's very interested in any content to help him do a better job.
Mhm.
And in this paper, he wrote that there's something called the Harvard taxonomy. Asked Kay what it was. It's a paper that Harvard published about 40 years ago, talking about rate structures, but that is now dated. Nevertheless, it does give you a background to show that regulatory approaches reflect deeper institutional philosophies. That rings the bell for Brandon, since he's a philosopher. European approaches, namely Ireland's self-sufficiency requirements, in Germany's mandatory PUE threshold, I don't know what PUE stands for, excuse me, establishing binding performance standards. Does that sound familiar? Remember, Kay is talking about a bridge to the future, which means that we don't remunerate utilities based on the cost of service, but based on their performance. So these particular data centers have to perform. And how do they perform? We're going to talk about in a minute. So data must meet regardless of their economics. The just adjudication approach, which is the way we do it in the US, we don't specify mandatory performance standards. We just punish people for using too much or too little electricity and hope that works. It reminds me of a situation I have right now. Where I have a person I rented to, someone, and the lease says you can't smoke. He smokes, and now his apartment smells like tobacco. So I've got to then go in and hammer him or evict him and take my apartment back and charge him $24,000 because the lease required him to be obligated to pay the whole thing out even if he gets evicted. Or should I instead create a situation where there's mandatory performance so the problem doesn't get out of hand and I got to evict it? This is the question of, do you want to use an adjudication approach or specify rules in advance? So it leaves substantive outcomes to market negotiation and device review. It's being used as a different thing. Now read this in Spanish as well as I can. Concurso de demanda represents the most sophisticated attempt to resolve this tension, maintaining procedural fairness with introductory substantive environmental discrimination, the competitive allocation based on avoided greenhouse gas emissions. So they try to take an even middle road between the US and the German and Ireland's approach. But the point is, the debate isn't whether rate design is important, but whether non-traditional discrimination principles can survive the energy coalition. Namely, there's obviously a collision between the needs of AI and the energy needs of the rest of the world. So another one of his comments, and by the way, if you want to see, let me just turn this off for a minute and see where we're coming from. This particular comment is associated with this place in the document, or wherever you are in the document. It says the pay, but certainly this is written by the guy Craig from AWS Amazon Web Services,
Web services.
AWS. Okay, certainly Central was Amazon. We're trying to help answer this question. What was the question? How do we use rate design to solve the climate problem. And he said, so far, we're very much committed not only to paying our fair share, but ensuring we're paying the full cost of service, where in many places, we're typically the largest electricity customer in the system, so we're seeing it now. There are a number of these regulatory forms, primarily at the state level at the moment, are utilities proposals that are trying to help answer the question, who's going to pay for the infrastructure?
Who's going to pay for the infrastructure?
Right. And Luca says, you don't have a plan to do it. It's all bullshit. So let me go to the next one and see where that comment is. And this is where there you put in context those two sections. They were talking about buildings and energy, manufacturing energy and building energy, cooling use. And those two sectors account for 2/3 of all energy consumption in the world, and therefore would have a big carbon footprint if we could solve it. And they say AI, we're done at 1/2 with 1%. We're a small percentage of the data center energy. We could use a little bit of the AI to reduce the huge footprint. We're just talking about manufacturing as well as in buildings and transportation. And therefore, a very big net benefit to energy consumption. However, here's his comment. So we'll go back and look at that. So I'm going to turn on magnify so you can see. Okay. All right. I have too many zones. We're gonna have this. Oops. Let me try that. Uh-oh. How do I get out of this? I think so. I think I can knock it over. Here it is. Okay. So this is what he's saying about net benefit. Yeah. The net benefit calculations assumes AI efficiency gains in additional to what would occur anyway in normal technological process. That's characteristic one. It needs all three. Two, efficiency improvements don't simply enable more consumption. Namely, if you become more efficient, you might use more energy. And three, the energy savings materialize in the same jurisdictions that bear the data center electricity burden. If you don't get all three of these, then you don't get any saving. That's what he says. None of these assumptions are proven. Meanwhile, AI companies facing computing scarcity, which happens every now and then, will then throw away their requirements to meet their environmental and safety requirements. And this comment we just made is based on a study, that Yale study that Lenovo quoted in 2025, suggesting the actual trade-off is between AI expansion and climate protection, not AI-enabled and efficiency gains, which means what we just saw in the document was bullshit. Okay, let me go to the next comment, which was this one. This framing of this framing obscures the regulatory challenge of European regulators. So let's go back and look what they said. So go back, get rid of this, and look at this text. And in this case, he says, when you're making great use of that, it of course does lead to more efficiency of the grid because you're able to make better use and get paid for the energy that's actually available rather than having it go to waste. It really does turn these data centers into grid assets and helps us normalize the pricing between variable power and dispatchable power. So this comment is about what's the difference between variable and dispatchable. That's not what Luca is talking about. He's saying that what they said is they have dispatch, they can flex the power plant. So over here, go to the image magnification again, so you can see it. Right. So, can't get to it. So, I'm sorry, this is the bouncing around. I'm going to change it to 200% for something like that. Okay. So that here we go to that's really good. So on available data, this is about the let's see. This is about the flex down. Okay. The framing obscures the regulatory challenge that European regulators have grappled with, as documented in this article. Right. Ireland CRU proposes a required data service to demonstrate energy self-sufficiency precisely because they've become grid liabilities, consuming 21% of the national electricity instead of grid assets. In other words, they're big drains in our assets in Spain. And the concurso de the demanda, competitive demand allocation, I guess that's the translation of what Spanish says. Abandoned traditional first comes, first served grid access specifically because data centers are not neutral asset and grid assets are massive inflexible roads, creating AI climate dilemma in resource allocation pricing. So let's look at this one. So again, let's look at it so we can see what it is. And I'm going to go over here to navigate all these things at the same time. All right, go back to 100%. So I can move them down. And so in this one, then when we could take, they're saying that flexible is useful. We also have the batteries there to absorb some of the shocks, so we combine all of those together. It's powerful. I like to be optimistic. I think we have more reason to be optimistic than ever. And we still have 15 minutes to go. So based on available data, we'll go to higher size. All right. Oops. No, it's going the wrong way. Yeah, go back to this. Okay. It's hard to do this. We do all these movements. I get to 200% and moving around. Okay. Okay. Two ways to get there. One way is a good idea mouse. Okay. In the base of available data, much less optimistic. Microsoft, OpenAI, and NVIDIA technical analysis reveals that AI training facilities have ramped up speeds of PU, I know what PU means, of 1.9 per second. I think that's pica. I think you have megabits and terabits. These are pica bits per second.
Petabits.
Petabits.
Petabytes.
Causing frequency oscillations in the grid. The NERC white paper of 2024 documented 1,500 megawatts simultaneous load loss during the routine fault caused by these calculations. This contradicts the flexibility narrative. Facilitates engineers to never tolerate interruptions, require extreme reliability, do not simultaneously flexible loads that help grid stability. The speaker conflates the three distinct concepts: spatial flexibility in siting, temporal flexibility in schedule, and operational flexibility per example with on demand. I can explain those if you want. The first two are realistic. The third is completely incompatible with requirements that should be up all the time. And then we get to the last of these things. And I get to this place where I can change the screen resolution so I can navigate better to 100%. And then go to this one, which is in reference to this place in the transcription. Can't move it. For those of you who primarily care about emissions associated with the learning of data centers, whether or not they produce AI and the potential of natural gas to play a negative but crucial role in the next few years, I would say it's an investment that's going to pay off very quickly because of AI second order impacts. And emissions, there's a growing consensus that it's going to be, that is, AI will be a net contributor to emissions reduction very soon. I personally think it's as soon as the next 3 years. And so then Luca said, and go back to 200% so you can see it. I hope I can go over there and try and navigate the system. Okay. So we wrote, timeline is highly speculative. Given current policy trajectory, the net benefit within 3 years projection lacks evidentiary foundation. The Yale AI climate dilemma analysis, which he quotes in one of his articles, shows traditional regulatory approaches prove insufficient because they address AI energy policy in isolation. And look what they're about to quote. The Amazon, Pennsylvania FERC rejection and the Louisiana approval of new fossil generations for data centers, which is Louisiana, us, Northeast Louisiana, RPUC, did this, revealed U.S. regulators are still using 20th century frameworks for 21st century challenges, completely out of step with reality. European approaches, Ireland's moratorium on new data centers, and grid's competitive environmental allocations suggest policymakers see data center growth as competing with rather than enabling decarbonization. The 3-year timeline assumes rapid regulatory evolution, voluntary industry transformation, and perfectly efficient markets, none of which current evidence supports. Okay. We did it. We got through this sort of, and until I can get back to where we were, turn this to not magnify so you can see, and I'll close this, change it from, I'll close it temporarily so I can get back to it, and get control of it, and make it whoever side I want. So come on. So here's the same document in my document folder. I don't need it to be full screen, partial screen sign. So this is the document we're working on. Understand? I think it's very powerful. I think it's very important to ProRate Energy because it talks to the question of whether or not our software is up to the task. And I think the answer is obviously not, because our software is based on assumptions that there's going to be enough clarity of what's going on in the background, and there aren't going to be any major things to disrupt it. We're way out of class with this problem. Our rate design is based on assumptions that more like the way it was 10 years ago, not the way it's going to be in 5 to 10 years from now. And it's not up to the task. So the problem's really big. The question is, how do we get there? And this is very much down the alley of both Kay is in. We bridge to the future. So I actually went through these comments with Kay 5 hours ago, and she told me all this stuff is common knowledge to me and my colleagues. And praying for bridge to the future is all about doing this. And our colleagues in Louisiana, Devin New Orleans, Lawrenceville, ProRate Energy, have no idea about this stuff. They have
Wow.
no idea. And so it's important that we do this. The question is, where do we go from here? And I also want to interject that he thinks we need to have fewer meetings and have better meetings. Like this meeting pretends to really cover something vast. We don't cover it. We skip around. We don't really understand it. We really understand that we should look at one of Luca's comments and really dive into it and understand it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you mentioned, I'm interested in seeing the paper that he had at that conference, September
so
the 12th.
That's actually one of the things he said.
That could be the form of next meeting. I know we have 5 minutes left. David had an interesting comment in terms of regulation, and I'm interested if we've done this with any regulatory structure in the
This is
past.
the paper. Okay, this is also computer.
I'm not interested in looking at it right now. I'm thinking for another meeting. It would be
Okay.
interesting to dive into.
Yeah.
I'm interested in David's comments. You mentioned, is there a way that we can have the data centers supply their own energy, or have to build their own infrastructure for producing this, or something like that? I'm not sure if there's anything like that in the history of regulation where we've not used the public, utilities
you.
to.
That came up at the end of the meeting. 3 questions came up.
Yeah.
Get to it. Her name's gonna come up in bold, it's gonna pop up right here, and you'll see it. It's before that. It was before the Asian questionnaire. Here it is. Hi, I'm Maribeth Mendonata, the CEO of Onyx Renewables. I said, okay. Why don't we change it so that the talking about not localized? Why don't we have the power over at the grid edge? She didn't quite say it that way. Yes, she said. Okay. And that is a really good idea. Let me see if I can read how she said.
Yeah.
I'm still looking at HVAC tape. Why don't we turn around the structure of the industry we're talking about centralized energy. Why not talk about localized utility systems or localized solution? So I actually talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago. I said that we can get resilience by building into our buildings and make the grid have microgrids. And the microgrids then power the grid. Now, that doesn't solve the AI question, but there's another technology I heard about where people are actually selling a computer and a battery system in your house, which does all the AI work for you. Obviously, it doesn't all of it. It collects, it gets on the cloud and gets extra work done, but does a lot of the local work so that you have the AI in your own house. And so we put microgrids in everyone's house and put a significant percentage of the computing power in your house as well, which you can draw on from other people's houses, but primarily does the heavy lifting and the orchestration of the AI inference or calculation or an algorithm. And so we've distributed the AI load into the grid edge, and there's someone actually trying to sell that technology. Okay, so that's actually quite interesting. Maybe it's an answer. I don't know what the answer is, because the trouble is, I think I know a lot about electricity, but I know a lot about AI. But AI is a monster, and it's already here. It's already infiltrated Europe, and they're rebelling against it. And Europe, the United States is naive, and regulators are saying yes to questions they have no idea of the complexity. I don't know if it was Brendan or Kate said, if you want to learn how to fly an airplane today, they put you on flight simulator for months or weeks until you don't crash the plane 20 times in a row. And then you put your, okay. Well, we have simulators for learning utilities that are just as sophisticated. And you should not be allowed to be utility regulated until you can run those simulators and you don't crash the system. And until you know all the bells and pieces of how things work together, and you try to fly the plane, you should have no business trying to decide what happens. And so AI can help us solve the problem by helping us figure out what's going on. The truth is, I don't have the depth of understanding that Kay has about the complexity of this. But we need to recognize that's where we need to go. And I don't know how to get there so easily. So maybe if we want to take this down into pieces, like one of these 5 comments that Luca said, and try to understand better, that'd be one way to go. I can communicate with Luca to, 8 hours from now, it'll be light in New Orleans, and it will have been light in Europe 6 hours before that. So we could have a conversation maybe with WhatsApp or something and talk about how to move forward, because he's inviting us to move forward with him because he considers us an asset and we consider him an asset. Okay, so I don't know how to go. Anyway, I have suggested a whole bunch of things. We're almost out of time, but I'm gonna, because I don't want to be rude, I would hopefully Brendan and Dave will say something now.
Well, my thoughts are, since the data centers are profit centers that are going to make a lot of money, why should society pay for them to make money? The data centers need to fill some of their electricity needs that society can't match if they want to make those profits.
So it's not cost shifting onto the other ratepayers.
That's right. Though unfairly burdening the rest of society so that they can make money.
As I said earlier in the document, I'll repeat right now, that this guy Ed said, the biggest problem facing the electricity grid is rate design. And I said, no, there are lots of other problems. And one of the ones, which is a really big problem, is that anybody can connect to the grid and demand as much electricity and power as they want.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not okay. We have to put a stop to it.
Well, like I said, back 20 years ago, they told Verizon they couldn't build they could build their building, but there wouldn't be any power for it.
Right.
It's like Bitcoin mining, yeah. Like, well, why don't we just open a bunch of?
Right.
Yeah. It's like you can build a building, but there's no power.
Well, we are closest to the experts in Louisiana as anybody, maybe obviously more, to understand them. To understand how our rig design can help, or if maybe you can't, and how to understand really these challenges, how to deal with this. I'll use the magnifier so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'll go to 200%. And change the,
Well, I guess if I were to tie this in with ProRate, one thing that battery use would do is maybe help with that flexibility part. If there is any critical part of their infrastructure that they need, they can use batteries, and then that way they can still be load flexible to some degree for the Virginia example.
so which of these problems is the biggest problem? We don't want to try anything new. We have the best regulators money can buy. Our investment, we use investment instead of performance-based remuneration. Our grid operates with the wrong principle of central to out instead of out to in. Equity and fairness have always been undermined by numerous cross subsidies. But I think it's number 6. So right here. You zoom right. If you connect to the grid, you can get as much power and energy you want. That has to be stamped out. It's as dangerous to the planet and the economy as murder. It will kill the economy. It will destroy the planet. And all just for the greed, some companies want to win a race. Okay. That's the problem, I think. Question is, how do we address it? I don't know. Anyway.
Magic word is no.
Yeah, the answer is no. Now, how do we get
No.
there? Okay. So that's what Kay's trying to do, build a bridge to the future. These are the kinds of questions that we have. How do we solve them? So anyway, I hope you guys found this interesting. It's probably more of a question than an answer. I don't really answer all these questions. You have this guy, Luca, who wants to help us.
Yeah.
Okay, Luca, and we can communicate with him. If we plan a meeting that's not in the middle of the night for him, which would be like 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the US, he'd probably be happy to join us and talk to us. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm flexible.
So let's try to read this. This is a slideshow for a talk we gave.
I wonder if you have speaker notes or if this is just it's the PDF version.
Say, no, this is, you have to get this, we should get the speaker notes. We should get his bibliography.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do a little bit of research on that.
Okay. This is the Harvard taxonomy thing you're talking about.
Yeah, the Harvard one. Yeah.
So we've got a lot of content to sort through. I did a lot of work to get this done so we could review it and appreciate it. And I don't know if I did it right. Kay thinks some of the things were sloppy. And she thinks we're biting off too much than we can chew. She said we should have fewer, better meetings instead of more poor meetings.
Yeah, I could say maybe every other week instead of every week.
It's okay with me. I'm just saying.
I think it is good that, you know, when we have something that's substantive to discuss, you know, like maybe even going over Lo Shivo's work next week, you know, would be good. But yeah,
It turns out this issue, this particular issue, to me is very scary because I live in a little tiny world of keeping myself economically viable and protecting my inheritance by keeping the real estate going. And it's a sinking ship because Louisiana is sinking and because the cost of insurance goes up and the taxes go up and the price that's paid go down, and it's a sinking ship. So I was told, Brendan and others, to sell all your stuff and put it in the stock market. Well, imagine the stock market. Oh, great, let's put it in video. Then maybe that's a good place to put it. but all these people are in a race.
Index funds are great. You spread
All
out
the
the risk.
economic activity, they are undermining, jeopardizing, stifling by their electric system. It's actually very scary what it could do to the economy. Okay. And so we're actually looking at something which is way bigger than an energy problem. It's an economic problem, it's a political problem, an environmental problem, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And if we don't try to figure it out, who's going to do it? Okay. I don't know the answer. I know what I said when I made these comments. I know where these comments come from. And to turn the whole thing into a conclusion and a clarification like Luca did, is a little bit beyond me. And I'd like to try to understand it. So maybe what I should do is invite him to give us a talk, to give us an overview and understanding of where we go from here. And then maybe you'll talk for half an hour, we'll ask some questions. You guys think?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's okay to do it at a different time as
Yeah,
well.
we gotta do it at least.
Maybe you should ask him when works best for him,
Right. Okay,
and then we'll definitely round on a call for that later. I'm going to stop the recording. Just
Okay.
then we can open up.